The downside of positional leadership. True leadership is not about position. Like everything else in life, the position level of leadership has negatives as well as positives. Each of the levels of leadership possesses downsides as well as upsides. You will find as you move up the levels that the upsides increase and the downsides decrease. Since position is the lowest level of leadership, it has a great number of negatives. On level 1, I see 8 major downsides. Number 1, having a leadership position is often misleading. The easiest way to define leadership is by position. Once you have a position or title, people will identify you with it. However, positions and titles are very misleading. A position always promises more than it can deliver. I learned this lesson about level 1 when I received my first leadership position in my first church. I mistakenly thought that being named the pastor meant that I was the leader. I couldn't have been more mistaken, as I found out in my first board meeting. Soon after, I officially started the meeting as the designated leader. The real leader took over. His name was Claude. He had lived in the rural valley where the church was located all his life, and everybody loved him. His influence was obvious as the other members of the board looked to him for direction and asked him questions regarding every issue. I could have left the meeting and no one would have cared. In fact, I could have left the meeting and no one would have noticed. I was shocked. The first meeting and all the subsequent ones, all eyes and attention were focused on Claude, the real leader. The board members were not following me. Even though I had the job title, the calling, the appreciate college degree, the office, the salary, all of the positional stuff. Claude had none of those things, and yet they listened to everything he said. My mistake was thinking that I had become a leader because of my position. Instead of recognizing it as an opportunity to become a leader, I did not understand that leadership was given to me but not yet earned by me. I was a little too much like the driver in this comic, Laugh Parade, by Bunny Hoist and John Rayner. Back then I defined leading as a noun, as who I was, not a verb, as what I was doing. Leadership is action, not position. When I arrived at that first church, Claude had been earning his leadership influence through many positive actions over many years, and people followed him as a result. Claude, who was a down-to-earth farmer, explained it to me later, saying, "John, all the letters before or after name are like the tail on a pig. It has nothing to do with the quality of the bacon." I have come to embrace leadership as action, and I am here to teach that concept to leaders in conferences and seminars at home and abroad. One of the ways I do that is through my international non-profit leadership organization, EQUIP, which has trained more than 5 million leaders in 160 countries. The organization's trainers now have found the number one challenge in developing countries is introducing the idea of leadership as action instead of position. Leaders in these countries often possess an "I have arrived" mindset. We want them to understand one of the most important characteristics of leadership. Leaders are always taking people somewhere. They are not static. If there is no journey, there is no leadership. Number two, leaders who rely on position to lead often devalue people. People who rely on position for their leadership almost always place a very high value on holding on to their position, often above everything else they do. Their position is more important to them than the work they do, the value they add to their subordinates, or their contribution to the organization. This kind of attitude does not This kind of attitude does nothing to promote good relationships with people. In fact, positional leaders often see subordinates as an annoyance, as interchangeable cogs in the organizational machine, or even as troublesome obstacles to their goal of getting a promotion to their next position. As a result, departments, teams, or organizations that have positional leaders suffer terrible morale. Often, to make themselves look better or to keep people from rising up and threatening them, positional leaders make other people feel small, half, by not having a genuine belief in them, by assuming people are constant of assuming they can, by assuming people can't instead of assuming they can, by assuming people won't rather than believing they will, by seeing their problems more readily than their potential, by viewing them as liabilities instead of assets. Leaders who rely on their title or position to influence others just do not seem to work well with people. Some don't even like people. Why? It's chicken or egg question. Really? Do we not work well with people and as a result they rely on position? Or is it that because they rely on their position, they never take the time and effort to work well with people? I don't know. Maybe both kinds of position leaders exist. But here's what I do know. They neglect many of the human aspects of leading others. They ignore the fact that all people have hopes, dreams, desires, and goals of their own. They don't recognize that as leaders they must bring together their vision and the aspirations of the people in a way that benefits everyone. In short, they do not lead well because they fail to acknowledge and take into account that leadership of any kind, in any location, for any purpose, is about working with people. Number three, positional leaders feed on politics. When leaders value position over the ability to influence others, the environment of the organization usually becomes very political. There is a lot of maneuvering. Positional leaders focus on control instead of contribution. They work to gain titles. They do what they can to get the largest staff and the biggest budget they can, not for the sake of the organization's mission, but for the sake of expanding and defending their turf. When a position leader is able to do this, it often incites others to do the same because they worry that others' gains will be their loss. Not only does it create a vicious cycle of gamesmanship, poaching, and maneuvering, but also creates departmental rivalries and silos. For a very short time as a young leader, I worked in a highly political environment like the one I described. It was like working in a minefield. There were many unwritten rules and hidden protocols for setting up appointments with superiors or selecting who ate with at lunch. There was a great emphasis placed on using proper titles to address people, and much of how you were treated depended on your background. Needless to say, I did not do well in that environment. I immediately looked for a better place to develop my leadership skills when I found it and left. I was so happy, and so were they. I have had to find a highly political organization that runs at top efficiency and possesses high moral. Just look at most of our government institutions and think about the leaders and workers in them. Most people could certainly use improvement, and moving away from positional leadership would do a lot to help them. May God bless you. All the best. Your friend in Christ and Solomon. Positional leaders place rights or responsibilities. Poet T.S. Eliot asserted, half of the harm that is done in this world is due to people who want to feel important. Don't mean to do harm. They are observed in the endless struggle to think well of themselves. That's what positional leaders do. They do things to make themselves look and feel important. Inevitably, positional leaders who rely on their rights develop a sense of entitlement. They expect the people to serve them rather than looking for ways to serve their people. Their job description is more important to them than job development. They value territory or teamwork. As a result, they usually emphasize rules and regulations that are to their advantage, and they ignore relationships. This does nothing to promote teamwork and create a positive working environment. Just because you have the right to do something as a leader does not mean that it is the right thing to do. Changing your focus from rights to responsibility is often a sign of maturity in a leader. Many of us were excited in early leadership years by the authority we had and what we could do with it. That power can be exhilarating, if not downright intoxicating. It's the reason President Abraham Lincoln said, nearly all men can stand adversity, but if you want to test a man's character, give him power. Each of us as leaders must strive to grow up and grow into a leadership role without relying on our rights. If we can mature in that way, we will start to change our focus from enjoying authority for its own sake to using authority to serve others. Number 5. Positional leadership is often lonely. The phrase, it's lonely at the top, must have been uttered by a positional leader, either that or by someone with a personality disorder. Leadership does not have to be lonely. People make it that way. Positional leaders can become lonely if they misunderstand the functions and purpose of leadership. Being a good leader doesn't mean trying to be king of the hill and standing above and set apart from others. Good leadership is about walking beside people and helping them to climb up the hill with you. If you are atop the hill alone, you may get lonely. If you have others alongside you, it's hard to be that way. King of the hill leaders create a negative work environment because they are insecure and easily threatened. Whenever they see people with potential starting to climb, it worries them. They fear that their place on top is being threatened. As a result, they undermine the people who show talent, trying to guard their position and keep themselves clearly above and ahead of anyone else. What is the usual result? The best people, feeling undermined and put down, leave the department or organization and look for another hill to climb. Only average or unmotivated people stay, and they know their place is at the bottom. That develops an us versus them culture, with the positional leaders standing alone on top. Leadership does not have to be lonely. People who feel lonely have created a situation that makes them feel that way. Number 6. As I began to lead people early in my career, I learned a valuable lesson. I always tried to set up new leaders for success, and I often gave them everything I could to help them become established leaders. A leadership position, my time, my influence, modeling, resources, leadership opportunities. And there's what I found. If I gave the good potential leaders little or nothing, they still succeeded and become good leaders. In contrast, when I gave mediocre leaders everything I had, they still didn't succeed and couldn't establish themselves as good leaders. The position does not make the leader makes the position. Whenever people use their position to lead others for a long time and fail to develop genuine influence, they become branded as positional leaders, and they rarely get further opportunities for advancement in that organization. They may move literally, but they rarely move up. If you have been a position leader, you can change, and this book will help you. However, you need to recognize that the longer you have relied on your position, the more difficult it will be for you to change others' perception about your leadership style. You may even need to change positions in order to restart the process of developing influence with others. Number 7. Turnover is high for positional leaders. When people rely on their position for leadership, the result is almost always high turnover. One of the chapters in my book, A Leadership Gold, is titled People Quit People, Not Companies. In it, I explain how people often take a job because they want to be part of a particular company. But when they quit, it's almost always because they want to get away from particular people. Good leaders leave an organization when they have to follow bad leaders. Good workers leave an organization when the work environment is poor. Interview a person who has left and odds are high that they did not leave their job. They left the people they had to work with. Every company has turnover. It is inevitable. The question every leader must ask is, who is leaving? Are the eights, nines, and tens leaving? Or the ones, twos, and threes? If eights are leaving and threes are coming in, there is trouble ahead. Organizations with level 1 leadership tend to lose their best people and attract average or below average people. The more level 1 leaders an organization has, the more the door swings out with high level people and in with low level ones. About a year ago, my friend Linda Sasser wrote me a note in which she talked about the dynamics that occur when high level employees find themselves working for a positional leader. She says that these people often become lost leaders. Here is what Linda wrote. It seems that a level 1 leader also finds it difficult to have level 3 employees. Good middle level leaders make incompetent leaders uncomfortable. So while it is true that employees will leave a weak level 1 leader, it is also true that level 1 leaders will remove level 3 followers. Seeing this happen before my eyes has fascinated me and of course saddened me. So why do I call them lost leaders? They are great up and comers who have been called to lead because of talent yet are suppressed or driven away by level 1 bosses, therefore leaving them unemployed and lost amongst all the displaced workers. What a waste of time and talent! Every time a productive worker or a potential leader is driven away by a positional leader, the organization suffers. It's a fact that an organization will not function on a level higher than its leader. It just doesn't happen. If a level 1 leader is in charge, the organization will eventually be a level 1 organization. If the leader is on level 4, then the organization will never get to level 5 unless the leader grows to that level. Number 8. Can you name positional leaders receive people's least, not their best? Can you name one organization that gets the least from its people and it's the best at what it does? Can you name one coach who gets the best from team members and has won a championship? Can you name one teacher who gets the least from students yet ranks highest among peers? Can you name one country that gets the least from its citizens and is respected by the world? Can you name one marriage that gets the least from each spouse that yields a great long-term relationship? No, I bet you can't. Why? Because it is impossible to be successful with people who give the least. People who rely on their positions and titles are the weakest of all. Leaders, they give their least. They expect the position to do the hard work for them in leadership. As a result, they're people who give their least. Some people who work for a potential leader may start out strong, ambitious, innovative, and motivated, but they rarely stay that way. Typically, they become one of 3 types of people. All the best. Your dear friend in Christ and Solomon Raj.